I'm just going to wait a few more seconds to make sure everyone is able to connect and join us here.
And Ms. Kinsey, this is Chelsea O'Sullivan. Tilden Kim is in another meeting that's running a little late, so he will join us when he is able, but we don't need to wait for him to join.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for that update. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. It is October 18th, 2023, shortly after 1 o'clock. I am Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is a pre-hearing conference on the pending petition for change by the City of Solvang for water right permit 15878, which authorizes diversions of water from the Santa Ynez River in Santa Barbara County. This pre-hearing conference is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording along with the Zoom generated transcript to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If at any time you are experiencing technical difficulties trying to communicate with us, please send us an email to the AHO at admin@waterboards.ca.gov. AHO staff will be monitoring the email inbox and can let me know if you're having difficulties today. Assisting me are several staff of the Administrative Hearings Office. We have Nicole Mullen, Skylar Anderson, and Kyle Woldridge. I would like to go ahead and move to appearances at this point. To do that, I will identify each of the entities who's on our service list. And if you are representing that entity, please go ahead and unmute your microphone and state your name. And I will start with the petitioner, the City of Solvang. Ms. Sullivan, I know we already spoke, but go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, Chelsea O'Sullivan, Richards, Watson, and Gershon appearing on behalf of the City of Solvang. And I'll just enter Mr. Kim's appearance as well on behalf of the City of Solvang. So when he comes, we're good to go. And then Great. Taylor, go ahead.
Taylor Fulland on behalf of the City of Solvang with Richard Watson and Gershon.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
And Jacob Metz on behalf of the City of Solvang from Richards, Watson, and Gershon.
Thank you. Ollie Saul Guest Ranch.
Good afternoon, Stephanie Hastings from Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck on behalf of the Alisal Guest Ranch. I would also like to note that I unfortunately have a conflict that begins at 3 p.m. and in the event that our hearing continues at that point, I will be substituting in my partner Jessica Diaz. So I'll enter her appearance at that point if she needs to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope we will not run up against that deadline. So I don't anticipate that we will, but thank you. Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District, ID number 1.
Yes, hello, this is Elizabeth Esposito with Brownstein for ID number 1. And I'm joined today by Peter Garcia, the General Manager for ID 1.
Thank you, good afternoon. National Marine Fisheries Service.
Hi, I'm Lori Beal. I'm with the NOAA Office of General Counsel, Council for National Marine Fisheries Service. Joining me today is Mr. Richard Bush, our expert witness, and Mr. Anthony Spina, who is Mr. Bush's supervisor and colleague.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. California Trout.
Good afternoon, Maggie Hall with the Environmental Defense Center, appearing on behalf of California Trout. And observing from EDC as well, we have Brian Troutwine, and then with California Trout, Russell Marlowe.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District. I think we were referring to this as the parent district.
Yes, Brett Stroud of Young Woldridge for the parent district.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Steve Torjani with Young Wooldridge, also for the parent district.
Thank you. California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Afternoon, Lena Germanario, appearing on behalf of California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We also have on the line Stephen Puccini, another counsel for CDFW, and Kyle Evans, who's one of our expert witnesses. And I think Mark Gard might also be on listening in. Thank you.
Yes, I just got on. Thanks, Lena.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And the Kachuma Conservation Release Board.
Good afternoon, Sam Bivens, Downey Brand for the Kachuma Conservation Release Board, and we'll go by CCRB for this proceeding just to maintain the mouthful.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon. Is there anyone else on the call who plans to participate in our pre-hearing conference today who has not had the opportunity to introduce themselves? All right, I'll start with my vision of some of the topics that we should talk about today. First, I'll just note, I know we have a number of outstanding evidentiary rulings. I had aspired to get them back to you sooner. I did not mean that aspiration exactly, but I am working on them. I think you can expect to see a ruling on Solvang's motions in limine 1, 2, and 3, hopefully later today. Those will make their way out on the service list. I also will be issuing brief rulings. I just mean short, abbreviated, on Solvang's evidentiary objections. I'm calling them 1, 2, and 3, but the other evidentiary objections that were separate from the motions in limine. I think you'll expect to see those next. And then I will move on to the other parties' motions and do them. I'll issue them as I complete those rulings so that you can see them as soon as possible and plan accordingly. So I am working through those. On the agenda for today, I think most important is to identify our hearing days and fix those for certain. I think we have quite a bit to talk about, in the sense that I think I put most of the puzzle pieces together. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I think we mostly can get it done in the days we noticed, but there may be a little challenge with 1 or 2 of the witnesses. So I want to talk through that carefully, and I think part of that will be to discuss an order of proceeding for both the direct testimony and then the rebuttal testimony. This will help us. So if you have in your mind, to all the parties, an order of your witnesses, I think it would be helpful probably to talk about that today. I won't necessarily hold you to it. I mean, this may be a little bit of a flexible exercise as we work through everyone's schedule, but we will talk about that. I also thought it would be a good idea for us to talk about closing briefs today. We could discuss page limits and then also a deadline for those based on whenever our last hearing day is. And then, of course, I'd like to get to any other procedural issues that is on your minds that you think would be important to talk about. So first, I would turn to talking about hearing dates and fixing those. But is there anything else any of you would like to raise at this point before we move to a discussion of hearing dates? All right, so we will start the hearing on November 6th. We have that worked out, I think, so far. On November 6th and 8th, we will proceed from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I would imagine that we would start with the city of Solvang, with the understanding that one of your witnesses, Mr. Gibson, I think you identified, is not available on November 6th. So I am aware of that conflict. And we would account for that. I anticipate we would just hear from Mr. Gibson on November 8th. I think that's how it would go. I don't imagine I don't know. I don't want to cut ourselves short, but I imagine we would spend all of the 6 working through the other 4 witnesses for the city. And then November 8th, we would follow up and complete the hearing with the summaries of testimony and cross-examination of the city's witnesses, and then move on from there. I think I'll pause at that point and look to the room. Are there any comments so far? Is that Ms. O'Sullivan, does that fit with my understanding correctly that Mr. Gibson is not available on the 6th?
Yes, and maybe this is a good time for me to say that per your or your email last week, the parties all did meet and confer via email on hearing dates. So we do have, and I'm happy to, I can provide the information. We do have some, hearing dates that we know work for everyone. There's some that are, preferred backup dates,
Right.
to remain as backup dates because of some conflicts, but conflicts that people are, potentially able to work out if those days were needed. And then, yes, you are correct. Mr. Gibson is not available on the 6th, but the city intended to call, this kind of gets into the order of witnesses, but we don't intend to call him first, or, we intend to call him kind of later in the lineup. So we thought that was easily resolved. Yes. So do you want me to just go through what?
Sure, we might as
Parties
well do
confer
that
on?
and then we can work our way through. That would be great.
So November 6th, 8th, and 9th are already scheduled days. Everyone still agrees with those. The November 29th and 30th, the city doesn't have anyone going to the ACWA conference, so we would like to retain those as potential dates, but other parties, including, I believe, the parent district and potentially ID1 and ALISAL usually attend that and are hoping to attend it, but we're comfortable with maintaining those as backup hearing dates for city witnesses only, just because they were comfortable with that. So that provides a little flexibility on the direct testimony if needed, or for that matter, city rebuttal witnesses if we got that far. December 4th works for all parties. And then December 6th and 7th, this works for most parties. National Marine Fisheries Service is not currently available on those days, but could potentially rearrange their schedule if those days were needed. So again, possible, but not preferred. And then all parties are available on December 13th. And then there are a few other, in addition to Mr. Gibson's availability on the 6th, there's a few other dates where other witnesses, Mr. Gibson has a few other days where he's not available of those, and Kyle Evans and Brian DeMucha also are not available on all days. But I think the parties feel that we can work around that individual witness availability when we nail down the order of witnesses. So
Great, thank you. This is helpful. So let me just reiterate, so to make sure that I wrote this down correctly. It sounds like December 4th, all parties are available. And then December 6th and 7th are not preferred dates. It's possible, but not preferred. And then December 13th, all parties are available.
yes.
This is very helpful. Thank you to all of you for helping us work this out, because I do want to get this hearing completed by the end of the year. And I realize as we get close to Christmas and the holidays generally, schedules get very, very difficult. Maybe let's continue to proceed through day by day. And then if any of you, please don't hesitate to just speak up, or as I'm looking down at my notes, I can't always see if there's a hand raised, but please feel free to speak up if I get something wrong, or any of you have something to put in. But I look to the fish agencies. I believe I outlined just envisioning the 6th and the 8th, we'd get through the city of Solvang's witnesses. And then we would turn to, I believe, the other parties presenting direct testimony are CDFW, nymphs, and Cal Trout. Do the three of those entities have a preference about which witness goes first, or how you want to present your collective witnesses?
I'll jump in there, I guess, to start. We were thinking it might be ideal to have the fisheries specific experts, Kyle Evans and Rick Bush, go earlier and then move on to, hydrology experts. That's not a firm preference, but that would be helpful. And yeah, I think we don't have any limits on November 9.
Or November 8th. I think hopefully we would start on November 8th.
Oh, right. Yeah, November 8th.
That would be Are there any comments from any of the other parties about, I think that makes sense to go by subject matter and intermingle the different fish entities, if I may, witnesses based on subject matter. That's probably a helpful way to do it, but are there any concerns or comments on that approach? Can you, I mean, I think it's fair to ask, what I will do is I will ask for a proposed order of witnesses so that all of us know in advance. So when you're preparing, you know, I know when you're preparing cross-exam, we're in the hearing and you're preparing cross-exam, it's helpful to know, for everybody to know what order we may be going in so we can focus. So I'll set a deadline. Let's say probably just a week from now, for all of the parties to submit, with the understanding that we may have to change those based on witness availability, you know, that there's flexibility built in, but at least a proposed order of witnesses. And then I think it's helpful that we have November 29th and 30th held, but if we are, the problem is if we don't finish cases in chief, then the witnesses we won't have heard from won't be the city's witnesses in theory. It'll be the other agency's witnesses. So I'm not sure what to do about that. It may be, I mean, after conferring together, do you have any sense? I can look to you, Ms. O'Sullivan, just because you're off mute, but it's sort of unfair. Do you have any sense about whether or not you think we'll be able to get through all of the parties' case in chief witnesses? And it's not quite 3 days, but it's more than 2.5 days because we will be, I will be holding the hearing to a stop at just before 2 p.m. on the 9th.
Yes. You know, I don't have a sense of the extent of cross-examination that parties are anticipating. My one thought would be, you know, Mr. Gibson is available on November 29th. He's not available on November 30th. So one potential option would be, excuse me, if at the end of the day on November 6th, we are nowhere near where we thought we were going to be, we could push Mr. Gibson's testimony to November 29th and switch over to the CDFW, NIMS, and CalTrout witnesses to gain a little flexibility there.
Yeah, we could do that. That occurs to me too. So we can deal with this on the fly. So I just give a flag to all of you that we may be ordering witnesses differently on the fly to use our days to the fullest extent possible and make sure we can get through this hearing.
And then alternatively, we could just push, you know, use December 4th as additional case in chief testimony,
right?
And you know, have December 6th, 7th, and 13th for rebuttal, but I don't know if that provides enough days total.
Yes, and then we would have to use the 6th and the 7th. So I think that makes sense to me. I think we can work this flexibly, and I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and issue a hearing notice, including the 4th, 6th, 7th, and 13th. So all of the days we talked about, the amended hearing notice would notice the 6th, the 8th, 9th, 29th, and 30th, the 4th, 6th, 7th, and 13th, with the understanding that we would work within the caveats we're talking about today, so that, you know, not hearing from non-city witnesses, if you will, on the 29th and 30th, and trying to avoid the 6th and 7th. Ms. Beal, I see your hand is raised probably to comment on these dates, so please go ahead.
Oh, well, I was backing up just a tiny bit, so well, I'll go ahead anyway. Well, first of all, in terms of the December 6th and 7th dates, I am personally unavailable on those days. So that's the conflict that National Marine Fisheries Service has. And I'm not sure how it would work to try for me to get another attorney to cover. I had a question back to the city. I was wondering if the city could clarify my review of the witness statements and areas of testimony between Mr. Murphy, Mr. Matthews, and Mr. Vanderlinden. I wasn't completely clear how their testimony seemed to cover a lot of the same areas in terms of background, context. I was wondering if the city could kind of help clarify what different topics those three witnesses were going to cover, that would help me, for our preparations.
I guess I'll look to you, Ms. O'Sullivan, whether you have, and I don't have their testimony in front of me right now, but whether you have any more specific description, I don't know if you do, of what each would cover in the slide. I gather in the specific presentations of the oral summary of written testimony.
So I think their testimonies speak for themselves, and their oral summary would be within the confines of those testimonies. At this time, I'm not going to be commenting substantively on their presentations.
We have those, and just from, I should note, those presentations have been submitted with exhibits. Am I remembering correctly with this order?
Their direct testimonies have been submitted, and to the extent, I think for some of them, we did submit slides. If they aren't going to use slides, we didn't submit slides, but their oral summary would be about what their testimony is about.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Ms. Beal, that didn't entirely answer your question, but I think it's an appropriate response in this situation, that we do have all of the written testimony. So we would the oral summary would be within the scope of those boundaries. And I see another hand up. Is it, correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation, Spuccini. There. Oh, now
correct. Yeah, thank you. Stephen
There you
Puccini. Just in terms of trying to figure, we have a finite number of witnesses, obviously, and according to the notice, there is no time limit set for cross-exam, and I'm just wondering if there were a time limit, we could more easily calculate the amount of time it would take to go through all the different witnesses. So I guess my question is, and jumping ahead a little bit, whether or not there's any intention on your part to actually put a time limit on cross-exam.
I hadn't, and maybe I could have thought about that. I had not in the past, because it's to some extent I haven't done it in other proceedings, and it's sort of worked itself out in the sense that attorneys have been professional and worked through their questions, and then when cross-exam was unproductive, then I would keep things moving along. Now, given our strict time schedule that we're trying to keep here so that we can stay on track in the limited number of hearing days, that may be a good idea. I haven't done the math off the top of my head to figure out with the number of parties and the number of witnesses, how this works out and what time limit to keep. And then another part of that question would be the intent of CDFW, NIMS, and CalTrout to work to some extent, work together on cross to the extent you have similar to some. I realize there's similar interests, overlapping interests, but separate positions for each of you.
I'm offering that just as, not necessarily advocating for a time limit, but just if you did a rough math, and just assume, say, 15, 20 minutes, whatever, you would come with perhaps get a better understanding as to how long this might take to get through all the witnesses. So
yeah, and I will probably do that math. Maybe what I will do is I will do the math. If I do come up with a strict time frame, I will share that with you, obviously, in advance, so that all of you can prepare. I wish I had done it, but I can't do it on the fly at the moment and figure out how everyone would interact here. But I guess generally speaking, for the city of Solvang's witnesses, we would have questions from CDFW, NIMS, and CalTrout working together in some coordinated in some way. I would anticipate, and I hope. The other district, I know CCRB, Mr. Bivens, I would imagine, well, let me just ask, do you anticipate having cross-examination questions for the city's witnesses?
I anticipate having cross-examination questions for some of them, but not necessarily all of them. And the extent of that cross-examination is still sort of working itself out.
Yeah,
it will be judicious.
And then I will look to the other parties who are not presenting testimony. Do you anticipate having cross-examination for the city's witnesses? That would be the parent district, ID number 1, Olisol Guest Ranch. I think that's the 3 of you. Yes.
For the parent district, minimal, if any, I would say.
Okay.
Stephanie Hastings on behalf of the Alisal Guest Ranch. Unlikely that we would have any cross-examination of the city of Solvang.
And that's the same for ID number 1.
Great. Okay. So we're really primarily, I mean, it sounds like there's some from CCRB, but we're primarily talking about cross-exam by the fish agencies. So let me think about it, and then I will, it's a good point, and I will certainly share with you any thoughts I had on that, but I do want you to have the chance to ask your questions, but to do so in a manner that's helpful and effective. I think at this point we have a plan that I laid out. I will notice December 6th and 7th, but I can assure you, Ms. Beal, I'm not, if we really, I really don't want to use those days if you're unavailable, and I think we can work around them. So I will give you that assurance. Is there anything else we need to talk about in terms of schedule or the order of proceeding that we should address today instead of addressing, so we can save time during our hearing days?
I do just want to note, we've said it before, but Kyle Evans is not available on December 4 and 6 and 7, and he's both a case in chief witness and rebuttal witness. So yeah, just keep that in mind, please.
So Mr. Evans would be available for rebuttal on December 13th. That's the one day we would essentially have. If we're not going to hear from non-city witnesses on the 29th and 30th of November, then really the day for his rebuttal would be December 13th. Is that fit with your understanding? Yeah. Okay.
And I guess I just have a similar clarifying question, Ms. Kenzie, about rebuttal dates. So we're looking at the 6th, 8th, and 9th for direct testimony, possibly the 4th. And then are we potentially thinking that all of the rebuttal witnesses are going to go on the 13th, assuming that the 4th is consumed by direct testimony?
No, well, I hope the 4th is not consumed by direct testimony, because I think we wouldn't have time. We may not have time to get through all the rebuttal witnesses on the 13th. It looks to me like I did do the math on this, and this, not in the sense of time, but I have my rebuttal witnesses listed here somewhere, which is we have 2 from the city, 3 from CDFW, 1 each from NIMS and Cal Trout, and then CCRB, as you know, has 2. So we have actually more. I think we may have more rebuttal witnesses than case in chief witnesses, or the same. So I would hope to start rebuttal on December 4th. So we should all plan for that.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other clarifying questions or suggestions about our schedule?
I apologize. I know we all keep clarifying to make sure we understand what's happening, but I'm going to try it one more time. So if everything goes to plan, case in chief would be November 6th, 8th, and 9th, and we would finish in those 3 days on case in chief.
Ideally, yes.
And then rebuttal would ideally be December 4th and December 13th, and we would do it within those 2 days. We've got November 29th and 30th set aside in case the city's case in chief witnesses aren't done by then. We can finish them up then.
Yes.
And we've got the 6th and 7th as backup days for other rebuttal testimony, but some of NIMS witnesses or counsel may have conflicts, so we're going to try to avoid it.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
I understand it then. Thank you.
I'm asking you to hold the days. I know these are a lot of days, but hold them and we will use them. I mean, given the summary you just described, I'm reminded that it really seems unlikely we'll use the 30th, but I'm going to be greedy and just hold it out there as I'm holding the 6th and 7th. In case there's something productive we can do on those days that doesn't prejudice the interests of anyone who is not able to participate on those days.
If I may, Ms. Kenzie, I don't want to step on the parent district's toes with ACWA conference and all, but it seems like if we have more rebuttal witnesses than direct witnesses, but we have fewer days for that. I'm just worried that's not actually feasible.
You're suggesting that the city's rebuttal witnesses start on the 29th?
Or the 30th or the 29th, because the
We
city
could do that. I think I
witnesses
hadn't,
are available. And I know that that is not ideal for those who want to attend ACWA, but that was, those were originally scheduled hearing dates. So
no, I think that's right. I hadn't put those pieces. Like I said, they're shifting pieces here. So you're right. We could have the city's rebuttal witnesses begin on the 29th and 30th. And I do think we just have two, right, Ms. O'Sullivan? There are two city rebuttal
Yes.
witnesses. I think it makes sense to count on that so that we would, if things go ideally, we would be able to start with the city's rebuttal witnesses on November 29th. Thank you for that suggestion and clarification. I am going to attempt to write all this down in the amended hearing notice so that we have it written down. And if you have concerns or if you think I've misunderstood something we talked about, of course, please let our office know. Are there any other comments on scheduling of the hearing days or the order of proceeding during those days? Next on my list, and we can come back to, if things come up as you're thinking about it, we can come back to it. But next on my list is to talk about closing briefs. I thought it would make sense to discuss page length and then setting a deadline for closing briefs. My inclination is to set a page limit of 20 pages, double spaced on the closing briefs. It seems appropriate in this case, but I'm certainly open to other suggestions. And then I thought the closing brief deadline should be triggered off of the last day of the hearing, which now we have set as December 13th. We are over the holidays during that time. I mean, I was initially thinking of doing a shorter deadline of 2 weeks, but that doesn't make sense. We were right in the holidays. So I would look to about 30 days from December 13th, whatever that math is. But I'm open to other suggestions there too. Does anyone want to comment on my initial proposal of 20-page limit for closing briefs and due 30 days after December 13th?
This is Chelsea. I guess if you don't mind, I'll go for the city. Certainly defer to you, Ms. Kinsey, as the hearing officer. We were going to suggest no page limit, but about a month out from the last hearing date. It's not that I expect us to write a tome that's 100 pages, but you end up with 21 pages versus 20. Just maybe that we don't need the actual page limit, but on that. But 1 month, given the holidays, seems appropriate. Maybe I haven't counted out when 1 month from the 13th would land in January. But assuming it doesn't hit a holiday, then that makes
exactly
sense.
Holiday or weekends. So I'll check that.
It
No,
appears
thank
to
you.
be
On
Friday
page,
the 12th.
yes, please go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said it appears to be Friday the 12th, if I did my math right.
Sounds about right.
Better
And
than
on the
Friday the 13th.
we just did one of those. My children pointed it out to me. On the page limits, what I think we can do, I'm going to set a page limit of 20 pages. But during the hearing, if specific issues come up, I mean, it may be that it becomes apparent during the hearing that there are certain legal issues, particularly that may be worthy of further discussion. And then we can talk about whether to add additional page limits or brief certain issues separately. I'm open to those conversations. So let's go ahead and work through the hearing and see what it helps, distill down. I do have a legal question actually for the city in a moment, so maybe this is appropriate. But looking to the room, any other comments on closing briefs?
I mean, I'm not sure that closing briefs would have exhibits, but I assume the page limit would not include exhibits.
It would not include exhibits, although I can't imagine an appropriate
Yeah,
reason for exhibits, but
understood. Just want to make sure.
I'm often surprised. So.
Yeah. And then this would be 30 calendar days, not 30 business days, correct?
Correct, 30 calendar days.
Thank you.
And I would set a date. I was saying 30 days, that was in my mind, but when I set the deadline, it sounds like it's January 12th. My team will verify that, but it sounds about right. And I will set that particular day as the deadline. And I think the process that I've heard from is it's helpful to have till the very end of the day. So I'm fine with the deadline of 11:59 p.m. On whatever day it is, January 12th.
You beat me to the question. I was going to ask you what time of day.
Yeah.
I also calculated January 12th, just like Mr. Bivens, but that could be lawyer math talking. So
I'm sure it's right. So are there any other, those were the procedural issues I had on my list of to do today. Are there any other procedural issues that we should talk about today and not defer to the hearing time?
My only thought, which maybe we address this, but I was going to suggest maybe that the parties meet and confer about the order of witnesses because of the specific witness availability. And if that was the case, I don't know, maybe we would need another pre-hearing conference, but perhaps all of that can just be addressed by email, or maybe we hashed it out enough today.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. I very much appreciate that all of you talked before this pre-hearing conference, and it's very helpful to me, jumping in. I will ask all of you to please do coordinate on the order of witnesses. I'm going to set, like I said, I'll set a deadline of a week out to share proposed ordering of witnesses, given that we have this, we're going to have to be a little bit flexible, seeing how long cross-examination takes and what days we're on. But if there is a need for another pre-hearing conference, we can set that up. Just send me an email, especially if you have a proposed date amongst yourself for the pre-hearing conference. The AHO schedule is fairly open. So I usually could accommodate a pre-hearing conference on any given day. So send us an email and we can set that up if we need to. Ms. Beal, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there was an issue I wanted to mention. Fortunately, we ended up getting a last minute budget extension.
That's right.
Last time around. So the new deadline that could potentially turn into a government shutdown would be November 17th. I don't know really what to say. Right. We submit, information indicating that this, matter is important and should proceed, but I don't know how we would proceed in the event of that. And I understand that we're the only federal party affected. However, it just creates a lot of uncertainty for us.
It does, as for everyone. So thank you for bringing that to my attention again. And I've been aware of that, and I realize I don't want to say we're working on borrowed time. Hopefully this will resolve itself and this will not be a future problem. But thank you for that. If it does become an issue where the NIMS would be unable to participate because of a federal government shutdown, I think we should deal with that issue as it arises, because hopefully it won't arise. These things, it has happened, right? So I'm aware that it has happened. So let's deal with it as it comes, but noting that it is important to this proceeding that NIMS have the opportunity to participate. So what I anticipate we would do is then we would have a serious discussion about possibly deferring the remainder of the hearing. It's not what I want to do ideally. It's not what any of us want to do ideally. But in that hopefully unlikely circumstance, we can have that conversation. So that's my answer. Thank you. Ms. Germanario, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. So CDFW just wanted to get clarification on whether the AHO might allow the parties to present a demonstrative exhibit during the opening statement presentation. Essentially what we had in mind is sort of a visual aid that would clarify how the the testimony relates to the hearing issues. So it wouldn't be presenting new testimony or anything of that sort. It would just be clarifying. And if that is allowed, when would we have to submit those?
My inclination on that would be not to allow it unless the visual is something that has already been submitted as a, whether if it's a photograph or something from a report or, that you want to present. I think I would accept that. But at this point, I don't want to have new slides or new visuals. Unless I suppose if it's a PowerPoint, maybe you can give me more detail. Are you envisioning sort of like a PowerPoint with words on it, or like a photograph? What are you thinking? What are we talking about here?
At this point in time, not having drafted it.
Right.
Yeah. Or like a PowerPoint slide or two that just essentially are text explaining the linkage between the testimony and hearing issues to clarify.
So let's do this. I think this is interesting. I think it makes sense. I will hear if anyone has an objection to this. You can raise that in a moment. But I'd be inclined to allow let's say three slides with words on them, or an image that already, if it's an image that must already appear in what the party has submitted as an exhibit. I can see that might be helpful in providing an opening statement to make certain, that's what PowerPoints are good for. So I think that would be helpful. And then I'd want to set a deadline in advance of the hearing so that everyone would have a chance to see those in advance. Let me see. If our first hearing day is November 6th, I'd propose getting those demonstrative slides by November 1st. Well, let's do October 31st. I don't like setting days after it's an important holiday for some. Well, it's not really a holiday, but an important evening for some of us, especially those of us with children. So that would be my proposal, is to allow 3 slides with text that's not testimony. Of course, it cannot be testimony, or if it's testimony, it should be quoted from a particular, a witness's particular testimony and have the exhibit number. It can have images, but again, those images should be from what has already been submitted and should include a reference to the exhibit number, so that we know where it's from. Does anyone have any objection, and that they would be submitted in advance by October 31st? Does anyone have an objection to allowing this?
Just to make sure I understand, we're talking about a slide for the oral, opening statement, not
Correct.
A written opening statement. Okay.
Exactly. That's what, and Ms. Germanario, that's what you intended. That's how I understood you, but that's what you intended.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, we'll do that, and I will include it in my follow-up ruling from this pre-hearing conference. Are there any other procedural questions, concerns, issues we should address? So I wanted to take this opportunity because I can, and I'm a little bit going to, I don't know, put you on the spot, Ms. O'Sullivan, so we can follow up later, but I'm working through the testimony that we've received, and I thought it would be helpful for my understanding. One of the questions that came up for me, it's a primarily legal question, but I thought it might be helpful for me to get an idea of where you're coming from in advance, and I would have given you notice, except I thought of it yesterday, is whether the city is taking the position or has a position about whether the Santa Ynez is a navigable stream for purposes of the public trust doctrine. I didn't see anything about that in the Kachuma order. That's 2019, I believe it's 0148. But I think we all know the board's most recent order with respect to the operation of the Kachuma project. I think that order sort of punted on that issue as far as I could tell, didn't address it one way or the other. But as I was sorting through the issues, it occurred to me that this may come up, and it might be helpful for me to know the parties' positions in advance of the hearing. So I guess, Ms. O'Sullivan, I'm asking the question of you now, but it's perfectly fine if you want to say, let me get that back to you, and opening statements on the hearing day, that's fine. But I wanted to put that out there is something that had crossed my mind that may have, I'm not sure if it's a turning point in this proceeding, but it did occur to me. Do you know, I mean, I don't know if there's an order out there that maybe you're aware of where there's an indication from the board one way or another, or a court order, a court decision about the status of the Santa Ynez. Do you have any comments?
I would say not at this time, and that
That's fine.
something that we can address in our opening statement.
Great, thank you.
And
I
or
just wanted to flag
closing
that.
brief, I should say.
And
too.
I would have the same question for the other parties. I was just particularly curious about the city's position. And then I certainly would be interested if other parties have a different view. That would be helpful. Is there anything else we should talk about before we close out today? I think we checked off all the items I have on my list, and I really appreciate your cooperation and working with me and with one another to try to get this done. At least the hearing days completed in 2023. I think that's important to keep this moving forward. Is there anything else before we adjourn?
I think there was just one other issue in the notice, which was the issue of opening briefs. And I didn't know if you wanted to address that or not.
Oh, I probably put that in the notice. I think it came up in one of our one of our past pre-hearing conferences. So I'll ask of you, does anyone want to file opening briefs?
The city does not.
Okay.
I think the testimony stands for itself, and at this point, time is very limited, so it's unclear how we would fit that in the schedule.
That makes some sense. And I think with these 3 demonstrative slides, actually, that's somewhat helpful for having at least a bullet point outline of the points. Are there any other comments on opening briefs?
CDFW agrees that the time limit creates some problems, so.
Great.
Speaking for the parent district, I think it is a little bit of a time crunch, but also in my experience, if you have opening briefs and closing briefs, you're going to get the same brief twice.
Yes. It's just one I get in advance, which sometimes is helpful, but that sounds fine. Let's not do opening briefs. It hasn't been my practice, which is probably why it didn't come up in my mind. So we won't do opening briefs, but I do look forward to hearing your opening statements to help guide me in what I should be looking for in the testimony you'll be presenting. Is there anything else? Well, thank you. Thank you for all of your participation. You can expect to see a written memorialization, a written ruling, and amended notice of hearing from our office. Again, if there's anything in there that you think inaccurately reflects what we talked about today, or a new concern that we didn't address today, please send an email to the AHO and the service list, and we can address those. And if there's further information about ordering of witnesses or a renegotiation, please feel free to send that in. If we need another pre-hearing conference, we can schedule that. So thank you. Thank you for your time, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.